Okay, guys, here we go. Come on, hurry. Hold the door, hold the door. Stop pressing the buttons, guys. Stop pressing the buttons. Stop pressing the buttons. Boys, stop bothering the man. Guys, seriously. Come on.
You going up to see the doctor? I'm going up to see the doctor. Kind of have this rash, it's real itchy. So, probably gonna need a cream, an ointment, antibiotic, I don't know. I just gotta do something. Oh, hey, this is me. See you, man.
Boys, come on, let's go.
I'll give you a call. That's no problem. I'll be in touch. Just tell him to send me a text when he shows up. And then, we'll have people coming over and, I don't know, we didn't even talk about menu. Sure. That sounds good. I'll talk to you later. Okay. Bye.
Wait, hold the door, hold the door.
Well, I first learned about boundaries when I was a kid and actually at home, in my parents' home living in Dallas, Texas. My dad was a pastor there, and in our church was a woman whose name was Gladys. Now, as a kid, I didn't really know much at all about Gladys. All that I knew was that she was different. And she was different from the standpoint that every night about 7 o'clock, and when I say every night, I mean almost every night for numerous years, our phone would ring and it would be Gladys. And Gladys would call and she wanted to speak to my dad, and she said she needed him then and she needed him to pray with her at that moment. And so Gladys would call night after night after night, and it's because of Gladys that I began to learn about boundaries. And so what would happen is every night Gladys would call, and when she would call, the phone would ring and ring, and my dad would not answer the phone. Instead, he'd let it go to the answer machine. And so every night, Gladys would call around 7 o'clock, the phone ring, go to answer machine picks up. Gladys would leave this frantic call that she needed help, she needed my dad to call her and pray with her right then. Now, my mom was probably one of the sweetest women that you would ever possibly meet. And occasionally, she would pick up the phone and she would talk with Gladys and she would pray with her. But most of the time, my mom was also incredibly strong. And so my mom was kind of the one that said, you know what, we're not going to take these nightly phone calls. And so my mom actually set some boundaries. And the boundary for us became the answering machine, where we said, Gladys, you can call, but all you're going to get is the answer machine. There's a boundary here. And what the boundary actually said is, if you want to call during the daytime and talk to my dad at the office, if you want to call because he's your pastor and you want to talk to him when he's at the office, call anytime you want. But when it comes to nighttime, when he's home with his family and he's doing kind of his family thing, then there's a boundary here. You don't get past that boundary. You're going to get shut out. And so the answer machine became one of the first boundaries that I ever remember hearing about. Sociologist Brene Brown actually says this about boundaries. She says, boundaries define what's okay and what's not okay. They help us define what's okay and what's not okay. And so what was happening with the answering machine is my mom was saying, you know what, it's okay to call during the day at the office, not okay to call at home at night. Boundaries help us define what's okay and what's not okay. And we deal with boundaries in all sorts of ways. And whether it's actually other people crowding your space in the elevator, whether it's somebody at work that happens to be a close talker, whether it's some relative that's always trying to get you to do things for them, we all deal with boundaries in different ways. As we say all this, what's interesting is you and I are responsible for our own boundaries. Nobody else is going to come in and set my boundaries for me. Nobody else is going to come in and enforce my boundaries for me. You are responsible to set your own boundaries. You are responsible to protect your own boundaries. And if you don't, people will push you and they will use you as far as you will let them go. And what typically happens is they push and they push and they push, and we don't set boundaries, and then all of a sudden we explode and it all becomes very ugly. And so protecting your boundaries is just your job. It's my job. It's your job for myself, your job for yourself. And so let me give you some ways 3 different ways that the Bible talks about for protecting our boundaries. The very first way the Bible talks about is just use your words. The simplest way. Use your words. Just learn to say one of the best words in the whole English language, no. No, learn to say no. Words set limits, and it's the first line of defense when you're dealing with boundary issues. And so that's why Jesus, when he was talking about how to use words, he says, look, it's very simple. Yes, I will. No, I won't. Whatever you're going to do, use your words, but use the words and use them clearly and set boundaries as you set them. And I don't know if you're like me. Sometimes I'll agree to do something I don't want to do. And so sometime later, I'm doing the very thing I don't want to do, and so I'm angry. And the funny thing is, I'm doing what I didn't want to do in the first place, and all of a sudden I'm angry, and I'm not really even angry with myself, I'm angry at the other person. As though somehow they're responsible for this. I mean, they asked me to do something I didn't want to do, and so I want to take it out on them, but the truth is, it's not their problem, it's my problem. I'm the one that said yes. I'm the one that said I would do whatever they're asking me to do when I should have said no. And so there's no reason for me to be angry at them. And there's no reason for you to be angry when somebody else is asking you to do something you don't want to do. Just say no. Just say no. Use your words to set boundaries. A second strategy for protecting your boundaries. And this one's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more serious, but the second one is just sometimes you have to create distance. And you have to put some distance between you. When people don't respect your boundaries, you have to create some distance between yourself and them. And it could be emotional space where you just say, you know what, I'm going to withdraw emotionally from this relationship, not going to go down that road anymore, not going to allow them to keep pushing me, hurting me. Sometimes it's a geographical space where physically you just separate yourself from somebody and say, you know what, we just need to spend some time apart. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 3 says this, a prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. So a wise person realizes they're going down a road and they make a decision and say, I'm done. I'm not going to keep going down that road. A simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. When it comes to boundaries, it's just saying, if you see that it's not going where you want it to go, distance yourself. Take steps. Stop it from where it's going. It's in your control. But if you keep on going, then you're going to suffer the consequences that happen with it. And it's okay to separate yourself from the situation, especially in the case of abuse, very much appropriate to step back and say, you know what, I'm done. We're going to have some space here. One more strategy when it comes to enforcing your boundaries, and this is huge, and we're going to spend more time talking about it next week, but it's just let people experience the consequences of their decisions. Let people experience the consequences of their actions. And so often we want to jump in and intercept the consequences. And we want to save them so that they don't have to experience the consequences of their decision. We do this with our kids. We go, oh, I don't want them to suffer for that. And so we jump in and we save them. So we take lunch money for them at school when they forget again and again. We take their homework for them. We take them to school when they're supposed to be walking to school. All kinds of ways that we step in and we jump in. Natural consequences are one of the best teachers that any of us could ever have. And so allow them to experience those consequences. Your quality of life is greatly impacted by the boundaries in your life or the lack of boundaries in your life. So I'm going to challenge you today to actually set some boundaries. And if you've already got boundaries, then I'm going to challenge you to actually enforce your boundaries. Begin to use words, begin to use distance, begin to use consequences to help you with your boundaries.